The quarrel started, as most quiet disasters do, with something small. Mr. Odinio had only asked a simple question over dinner. Bellamira, did you really tell the neighbor that Derek and Oluchi are not compatible? But simple questions can be like matches near dry grass. Bellamira dropped her spoon with a sharp clatter, her eyes widening in wounded disbelief. So your own is to sit there and count my words now? I'm the one that carried that boy in my womb for 9 months, and you are questioning me for trying to protect his marriage? Her voice gathered strength as she spoke, and soon the entire sitting room was vibrating under the weight of her indignation. She reminded him of every sacrifice she made, how she sold her wrappers to pay Derek's first school fees, how she stayed awake when their children were sick, how she never had a mother-in-law to defend her. And now he dared accuse her of causing trouble. Mr. Odinio, who had grown tired of the same circular arguments, tried to remain calm. He wiped his mouth with the edge of his napkin, sighed, and said the words that finally pierced her pride. You are not protecting their marriage, Bellamira. You are policing it. There's a difference. And if you don't stop, you will be the reason there is no peace in that house. The statement landed like a slap. She stared at him as if he had spoken blasphemy. To her, she was the only one truly seeing things clearly. She saw the way Oluchi spoke softly and stayed too calm in Bellamira's eyes. That calmness was a sign of hidden stubbornness. She believed if she did not correct her now, Derek would suffer later. So instead of hearing her husband's warning, she twisted it in her mind and heard only ingratitude. That night, she lay awake staring at the ceiling, her back turned firmly away from her husband. Every word he said replayed in her mind, not as caution, but as insult. So after all my years as a wife, you're telling me I don't know how to advise my own son? She fumed silently. By the time the first cock crowed, she had made up her mind. If they thought she was the problem, then she would go and prove she was the solution. She would move into Derek's house, watch Oluchi closely, correct her mistakes, and show everyone that she was right all along. In the quiet of that early morning, with anger dancing in her veins, Bellamira decided she was going to her daughter-in-law's home with one clear mission: to police, to supervise, and to save the marriage she believed was already in danger. Bellamira did not leave the way people leave when they are chased. She left the way a woman leaves when she believes she is absolutely justified. Before the sun properly rose, she was on her feet, tying her wrapper firmly around her waist as if she were preparing for battle. She pulled out 2 large Ganamusco bags from under the bed and began packing with determined hands, her best blouses, her long skirts, head ties, wrappers, comfortable house slippers. A few spices she trusted more than these children's seasoning cubes, and even her favorite frying pan. Each item she folded was like a point in her internal argument. They don't appreciate me here. Derek will appreciate me. Oluchi will learn from me. I will show them all. From the doorway, Mr. Odinio watched, leaning slightly on the frame, his face lined with equal parts fatigue and concern. Where are you going with all that load, Bellamira? He asked quietly, though he already knew the answer. She didn't look up. I'm going to my son's house. Before that girl finishes him with this, their modern marriage style. I'll stay there for some time and make sure things are done properly. He took a slow breath, shook his head, and tried one last time. You are going there to control, not to help. If you go with this mindset, you will not like how you return. But her pride stood up taller than her common sense. She zipped the bag with finality. You will see. When I come back, you will thank me. When the taxi arrived, she dragged her bags outside herself, refusing his help to emphasize her independence. As she climbed into the back seat, she lifted her chin and refused to look back at the house she had shared with him for decades. Her husband watched the car pull away, his chest heavy with the kind of worry only experience can bring. He knew that life had a way of teaching lessons no argument could deliver. While the taxi jolted along the road, Bellamira settled herself and rehearsed what she would say when she arrived. In her mind, she pictured Oluchi being grateful, Derek relieved, and herself being the wise savior of their marriage. It never crossed her mind that the person who would face the real test there was her. The morning was quiet at Derek and Oluchi's apartment. Oluchi was in the kitchen, humming softly as she stirred a pot of oats, the gentle smell of breakfast filling the small but neat space. Derek sat on the edge of the bed, struggling to knot his tie properly while replying to emails on his phone. Their routine was calm, slow, and familiar, the kind of peaceful normalcy Bellamira believed didn't exist. Then came a knock on the door. Not the usual, polite tapping. It was a loud, persistent bang that made the mirror on the wall rattle slightly. They both froze, exchanging a puzzled glance. "Who is knocking like that this early?" Derek muttered, getting up. Before he could reach it, the banging intensified. "Derek, it's your mother. Open this door." His heart dropped to his stomach. He opened the door, and there she was, Bellamira, framed by the corridor light, standing beside two massive gonna-must-go bags like a warrior arriving with weapons. Her face was raised, confident, expectant. "Good morning, my son," she said briskly, brushing past him without waiting for an invitation. Oluchi, still holding the wooden spoon, stepped out from the kitchen and almost dropped it when she saw her mother-in-law dragging her bags into the living room. Mama, good morning," she stammered, forcing a smile. "Welcome, Ma, are you visiting?" Bellamira gave a small, dismissive laugh. "Visiting? My daughter. I am moving in for some time. I came to help you people. I can't be sitting down in my husband's house while your marriage is going anyhow." Her tone was firm, as if a verdict had already been passed. Oluchi's smile wavered for a moment, then steadied. She glanced quickly at Derek, whose eyes were wide with silent panic. He managed a weak, "Mummy, you didn't tell us you were coming." She waved her hand. "If I tell you, you will start giving excuses. I know what I'm doing. I can't leave my son's life in the hands of an inexperienced girl and expect everything to go well. From today, this house will run properly." The words hung heavy in the air. In that moment, Oluchi understood. Her mother-in-law had not come to rest or bond. She had come with a mission to supervise and control. But instead of reacting with anger, Oluchi breathed in slowly, tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear, and decided quietly in her heart, if Mama wants to police this marriage, she will experience the full duty of a self-appointed officer. "I will not fight her, but I will not make her mission easy." Bellamira did not waste a single day easing herself into the environment. She began her inspection as soon as she dropped her bags. She took a slow, deliberate walk around the living room, running her fingers along the TV stand, checking for dust, straightening already straight cushions. She opened the curtains wider without asking. "You people don't open windows? That's why houses smell stuffy," she remarked, although the house was already well ventilated. In the kitchen, she opened every cabinet, studying the way plates were stacked, examining where spices were kept. Aha, salt beside sugar? What if person mistakenly? She clicked her tongue and began rearranging everything, shifting containers, moving plates, disorganizing the order Oluchi had spent months creating. Oluchi stood in one corner, hands clasped, watching silently as her system was dismantled in the name of proper arrangement. By afternoon, Bellamira had moved her policing to their marriage itself. She monitored how long it took Derek to reply when Oluchi called his name, watched how quickly Oluchi answered when he called, took mental notes of who picked up plates after eating. "Derek, why are you the one washing cup?" she scolded casually. "Is your wife's hand paining her?" If Oluchi tried to help, she turned it into another lecture. "You don't serve your husband late. You don't raise your voice at him. Did you greet him well when he woke up?" Never mind that Derek and Oluchi had developed their own gentle rhythm, full of inside jokes and quiet understanding. Under Bellamira's eagle eyes, every action became a test, every word an opportunity for correction. Oluchi felt the sting of the comments, but she also saw something Derek did not fully grasp yet. Bellamira was not just advising. She was trying to rewrite their entire way of loving each other. That afternoon, as they cleared the dishes, Derek whispered an apology. "I didn't know she would come like this," he murmured. Oluchi gave him a small, genuine smile. "It's okay," she replied softly. "She wants to run the house? Let her run it. I will not fight her." Inside, however, she was already adjusting her strategy. If her mother-in-law insisted on controlling every move, then Oluchi would simply step back and let her taste the full weight of what she claimed she could do better. She would remain respectful, calm, and firm, and in doing so, she would let reality become the teacher that neither she nor Mr. Odinio could ever be. That night, while Bellamira snored softly on the extra mattress they had laid out in the second room, Derek and Oluchi lay awake in the dim light of their bedroom. "Should I ask her to go back?" Derek whispered, guilt heavy in his voice. He loved his mother, but he had seen how quickly her presence turned their relaxed home into a tense space. Oluchi shook her head, her expression surprisingly peaceful. "No. If you do that now, it will look like I am the one chasing her. She came to teach us how to run our marriage. Let her experience what that really means." There was no bitterness in her tone, just a quiet resolve. Derek studied her face and realized his wife was not just gentle, she was wise. He reached for her hand, squeezed it, and in that simple gesture, chose to trust her approach. The next morning, Oluchi put her plan into motion, without announcing it. When Bellamira came into the kitchen, asserting, "From today, I will be in charge of cooking. You young girls don't know how to cook proper food," Oluchi stepped aside immediately. "Yes, Mama," she replied with a respectful nod. "I will be happy to learn from you. Please, handle everything the way you know best." She meant it literally. She ceased arguing about recipes, stopped trying to correct salt levels, and did not rush in to rescue meals when they started burning. When laundry time came, and Bellamira remarked, "Your washing method will spoil fabrics," Oluchi handed over the laundry basket. "Show me the better way, Mama." When it came to cleaning, she moved out of the way. "Arrange it as you like, Mama. I will maintain whatever system you choose." Within 2 days, the house that had previously run on quiet balance was now fully operating under Bellamira's self-imposed command. But with that command came full responsibility. She woke earlier than usual to prepare meals in time. She stood longer than her legs liked, scrubbing and scrubbing, because this is how we did it in our time. Her afternoons slipped by in a blur of rearranging cupboards and rewashing plates she claimed weren't properly rinsed. Oluchi remained polite, available when called, but never rushing to rescue or relieve. Every time Bellamira bragged about knowing better, life gently handed her another task that matched her words. Slowly, the mission she came with to police a marriage and reshape a wife began to turn into something else entirely. She was the one being stretched, pressed, and quietly frustrated by the very standard she had brought with her. And Oluchi, without one raised voice or insult, simply watched, waited, and let the lesson unfold. Bellamira woke up before everyone else, determined to prove Oluchi's cooking was below standard. She tied her wrapper tightly around her waist and marched into the kitchen as though entering a battlefield. At first, she moved with confidence, pouring oil, slicing onions aggressively, reciting old recipes from decades past. But the modern gas cooker hissed too quickly for her comfort, and the stainless steel pots heated faster than she expected. Within minutes, steam fogged her glasses, the stew started burning at the edges, and she began yelling for Derek to bring a cloth, then for Oluchi to fetch salt, then for anyone, to reduce the heat. Oluchi stood calmly at the doorway, hands clasped politely. "Mama, this is your kitchen now. Do it as you prefer," she said with such softness that it felt like a gentle trap. By the time the stew was done, Bellamira was sweating, panting, and blaming invisible forces for the chaos. Things worsened when Derek tasted the food. He tried to hide his reaction, but his eyebrows lifted slightly in surprise. "It's a bit salty, Mum," he murmured carefully. Bellamira flared instantly. "It is Oluchi's utensils. They confuse the hand." But Oluchi didn't argue. Instead, she nodded graciously. "Mama, since you've taken over the kitchen, I will just observe and learn." And she meant it. She handed grocery lists to Bellamira. She stepped aside any time cooking began. She left the entire responsibility of 3 meals, a full Nigerian household workload, on the woman who insisted she could do it better. By the 3rd day, Bellamira's back ached, Her feet were swollen, and she found herself muttering at the gas cooker as though it were her enemy. Still, she refused to admit defeat. What frustrated her most wasn't the work. It was the calmness with which Oluchi watched everything unfold. No raised voice, no anger, no complaints. Just gentle compliance. "Mama, should I wash these plates?" Oluchi would ask politely. "No. I will do it myself," Bellamira snapped, forgetting she had assigned herself the role of supervisor. Hours later, when her hands were pruned from water and her knees hurt from bending by the sink, she would look at Oluchi relaxing quietly and feel a sting of resentment she could not justify. Slowly, the kitchen, her chosen battlefield, became the place she dreaded entering. But pride is a terrible master, and she continued waking early each morning, forcing herself to cook meals she could no longer taste, convinced that quitting would mean losing. She didn't realize the real battle was no longer in the kitchen. It was inside her own stubbornness. Once Bellamira believed she had established dominance in the kitchen, she shifted her attention to Derek's daily habits. She began monitoring how long he spent in the bathroom, how quickly he replied when Oluchi called his name, how often he checked his phone. She sat in the living room with her glasses perched on her nose like a school principal, watching their interactions and making mental judgments. If Derek laughed too loudly at something Oluchi said, she frowned. If he spoke too softly, she accused him of hiding something. "A good wife should not let her husband sit idly," she remarked loudly one afternoon. "Oluchi, tell him to wash the car." Derek blinked in disbelief. "Mummy, I washed it yesterday." She waved dismissively. "Then wash it again. Dirt doesn't announce itself." Her interference grew so suffocating that even quiet breathing felt supervised. Derek tried to endure it, but the pressure mounted. One morning, while tying his shoelaces, he sneezed. Instantly, Bellamira rushed over. "What is that?" "Oluchi, did you open the window too wide? Why is my son sneezing? Are you trying to give him cold?" Oluchi, who had been making tea, looked up in calm confusion. "Mama, he sneezed once." Bellamira shook her head dramatically. "Everything begins with once. That's how sickness starts." Derek massaged his forehead, realizing the surveillance wasn't just uncomfortable, it was exhausting. He found himself escaping to the balcony more often, pretending to make calls just to breathe without commentary. And each time he returned, his mother found something new to correct, something new to question. She even suggested he stop wearing some shirts Oluchi picked for him because they don't make you look like a husband. Watching all this, Oluchi did nothing except remain unfailingly kind. She served Derek food, walked past Bellamira's criticisms gently, and offered no reaction that could be interpreted as disrespect. This irritated Bellamira more than rebellion ever could. She had come expecting to overpower a hot-tempered wife. Instead, she met a woman whose silence turned all her policing efforts inward. Derek eventually confronted his mother gently, saying, "Mummy, I am fine. Oluchi is not harming me." But Bellamira took it as evidence that her work wasn't done. Yet deep inside, she started feeling something uncomfortable, a loss of control, not over Oluchi, but over the narrative she came to enforce. Her son was slipping away emotionally, and she couldn't blame Oluchi anymore. She had started policing so aggressively that she unintentionally revealed who the real disruptor was. On the fourth morning, Bellamira stormed into the kitchen and declared, "This arrangement will not work. Oluchi, this your modern setup lacks sense." Before Oluchi could answer, she began rearranging everything with military precision. Spices here, oils there, plates in a different cabinet, pots stacked in new confusing patterns. Oluchi stood back quietly, hands folded, watching the chaos form slowly under the guise of correction. When Bellamira finished, she sighed victoriously. Now this is a kitchen. A woman should know how to organize a home. The new arrangement lasted barely 5 hours before disaster struck. Kneading ginger, Bellamira opened the wrong cabinet and mistakenly grabbed dry pepper. She poured too much into the soup, causing it to choke the air with biting heat. When she reached for salt to fix it, she grabbed sugar. Within minutes, the meal was ruined beyond saving. Oluchi walked in softly when she heard coughing. "Mama, is everything okay?" Bellamira, teary-eyed and fanning her face, struggled to breathe through the pepper fog. "Your arrangement is responsible for this confusion," she barked, forgetting she had changed everything herself. Oluchi smiled gently. "Mama, you rearranged it this morning. I'm only following your new system. Should we fix it?" The words landed like a slap, because the truth stood naked in the room. Bellamira had trapped herself in her own correction. The more she tried to defend her pride, the more she burned food, misplaced ingredients, and clashed with her own organization. Even Derek tasted the pepper-heavy soup and almost choked. In his confusion, he asked, "Mummy, who arranged the kitchen like this?" Bellamira froze. For the first time, she couldn't blame Oluchi. Oluchi leaned against the counter, calm and almost sympathetic. "Mama, maintaining your system might be difficult for me. You have much more experience. Please, continue handling it the way you know best." It was said with respect, but it sounded like surrender, a surrender that forced responsibility back onto Bellamira. Suddenly, cooking felt like walking through a maze she designed without understanding. She began avoiding the kitchen altogether, leaving things undone but too ashamed to ask for help. Her mission to fix the house had turned into a quiet humiliation, one mistake at a time. And every mistake reminded her of one thing she refused to admit. Oluchi's gentle strategy was working, not by force, but by reflection. The mirror she came to hold up to Oluchi was now pointed firmly at herself. By the 5th day, Bellamira was exhausted beyond measure, but pride still pushed her forward. She decided to call her friends for support and reassurance. After all, someone needed to validate her suffering. Sitting on the couch, she dialed her closest gossip companion, Auntie Fadik. The conversation started quietly, but as usual, it escalated quickly into complaints. "Fadik, if you see what I'm going through in this girl's house. She is pretending, acting gentle like a saint. But I'm watching her closely. She doesn't know how to run a home. If not for me, Derek's marriage would have scattered." What she didn't realize was that her phone was on speaker. Oluchi had just stepped into the living room to pick her folded laundry when she heard every word. The moment Oluchi froze, Bellamira noticed her presence. Her eyes widened with horror as she fumbled to remove the phone from speaker, but the damage was done. Oluchi stood silently, her expression unreadable. Auntie Fadik, still loud on the line, asked, "Bellamira, did she hear?" Bellamira stammered, I'll call you back," and hung up abruptly. A deep, uncomfortable silence filled the room. For the first time since arriving, Bellamira felt truly exposed. Oluchi walked closer with the same calm grace she always carried, set her laundry down, and said softly, "Mama, don't worry. You can continue handling things the way you prefer. Since you believe I'm not capable, teach me. I'm still learning." There was no sarcasm, no anger, just gentle humility. And that humility crushed Bellamira's spirit more than confrontation ever would. From that moment, Oluchi intensified her quiet strategy. If Bellamira claimed she did the laundry better, Oluchi handed her more clothes. If she said her cleaning was superior, Oluchi allowed her to do the sweeping. If she bragged she could teach a young wife how to maintain order, Oluchi asked for detailed instructions. Each request pushed the weight of her own words back onto her shoulders. In the evenings, when her legs trembled from standing all day, she would glance at Oluchi, relaxing peacefully, and feel trapped by the expectations she had created. The gossip call didn't just betray her, it shifted the balance of power. She had wanted to expose Oluchi, but instead, she exposed herself. And the worst part was the realization she couldn't escape. Oluchi wasn't fighting her. She was simply letting her drown in her own rules. Derek had been observing quietly, trying to balance respect for his mother with loyalty to his wife. But gossip travels faster than truth, and by evening, their neighbor Mom and Ketchy casually said, "Your mother is really trying. She told me she's helping rescue your marriage." Derek froze. "Rescue what?" he asked, his voice tightening. Mama Nkechi shrugged. "She said your wife doesn't know how to maintain a home, so she came to fix things." The words hit him like a punch. His hands clenched at his sides as realization dawned. His mother wasn't just interfering. She was publicly painting Oluchi as incompetent. He went home burning with frustration. The moment he saw Bellamira sitting on the couch watching TV as though everything was normal, he snapped. "Mummy, what exactly did you tell the neighbors?" Bellamira blinked in surprise. "What do you mean?" Derek's voice rose, something he had never done in her presence. "Why are you saying my wife is ruining the marriage? Why are you telling people you came to save us? Oluchi has never disrespected you. Never." His voice cracked with hurt. Oluchi stood at the doorway, eyes lowered, but her heart ached for him. Bellamira's mouth opened and closed like someone searching for excuses. I was only trying to help. I was just correcting her." Derek shook his head sharply. "No, Mummy. You came here to control. And you are embarrassing us publicly." The room felt too small for the intensity of his words. Bellamira shrank back slightly, feeling something she hadn't felt in years, her son's disappointment. The outburst hit her harder than any confrontation with Oluchi ever could. For a moment, her pride faltered, trembling under the weight of guilt. She had wanted to police their home, not break her relationship with her son. But the truth was undeniable. The more Derek defended Oluchi, the more Bellamira's excuses crumbled. She realized he wasn't angry because of disrespect. He was angry because she had crossed a boundary she didn't even acknowledge existed. After he stormed into the bedroom, silence flooded the house. Oluchi approached gently, placed a cup of warm water beside Bellamira, and whispered, "Mama, he will be fine. Just rest." Her kindness deepened Bellamira's shame. For the first time since arriving, she wondered if, just maybe, she had been fighting the wrong person all along. That night, sleep refused to come to Bellamira. She lay on the mattress in the guest room, staring at the ceiling in silence. Derek's voice replayed over and over in her mind, the disappointment, the frustration, the pain she never imagined she could cause her own son. She had always taken pride in being a mother who guided with strength, a woman whose opinions held weight. But now, for the first time in her life, her guidance had become a burden to the very child she raised. She sat up slowly, pressing her palms into the mattress, as though trying to keep herself from collapsing under the truth. "How did I get here?" she whispered to herself. Every attempt to justify her actions sounded hollow, even in her own thoughts. The exhaustion from days of cooking, scrubbing, rearranging, monitoring, and arguing finally settled into her bones. She felt heavy, not just physically, but emotionally, spiritually, mentally. She thought coming to Derek's home would make her feel powerful and needed, but instead she felt outnumbered by her own mistakes. The silent frustrations she had ignored all week returned now to weigh on her chest. Her pride, once booming and unshakable, felt delicate, like glass that had been tapped too many times and was now ready to crack. She suddenly understood why her husband had warned her. She understood why Oluchi never reacted. She understood why Derek looked at her with tears in his eyes. The problem was her. In the early morning hours, she tiptoed to the living room and sat on the couch, hugging her arms around herself. Oluchi found her there, staring blankly at nothing. "Mama? Are you okay?" she asked softly. Bellamira swallowed tightly. "I'm fine," she lied, though her eyes brimmed with invisible storms. Oluchi didn't push. She simply placed a folded blanket over her shoulders and walked away. That small, unexpected gesture felt like both comfort and punishment. It reminded her that despite everything, Oluchi had never raised her voice, never disrespected her, never fought back. And that truth cut deeper than any insult could. Bellamira rested her head in her hands and finally allowed herself to whisper what she had avoided all week. "Maybe I was wrong." Later that evening, while trying to sleep off the heaviness in her heart, Bellamira heard a soft murmuring coming from the living room. Curious, she stepped out quietly, expecting perhaps Derek on a late-night call. But instead, she saw Oluchi kneeling beside the couch, her hands clasped gently, her voice soft and trembling. "God," she whispered, "help me not to dishonor my husband's mother." Even when she tries me, give me strength to stay respectful. Help Mama see that I am not her enemy. Bellamira froze. The words pierced straight into her spirit, like arrows dipped in humility. She wasn't hearing sarcasm or pretense. She was hearing sincerity, vulnerability, and a kind of grace she had never been taught growing up. Oluchi continued, her voice shaking slightly. I know she loves Derek. I know she wants the best for him. Please help her heart soften. Please help her understand she doesn't need to fight me. That I am not taking her son away. Tears gathered in her eyes, and she wiped them quickly so Derek wouldn't notice. Bellamira's breath caught in her throat. She had expected Oluchi to complain bitterly, to cry about the pain she caused, to tell God about her sufferings. But instead, she prayed for her. A woman she had criticized, monitored, lectured, and gossiped about. A woman she had tried to overpower. That single moment shattered the remains of her pride. As Oluchi finished praying and slowly stood up, Bellamira hid behind the doorway, gripping the frame to steady herself. Her chest felt tight, but not from anger this time, from realization. The kind of brutal realization that only comes when one sees themselves clearly for the first time. She returned to her room quietly, but her mind did not follow. Oh God, she muttered beneath her breath, what have I done? What kind of heart have I carried all these years? She laid down again, this time curling herself into the mattress, overwhelmed by shame she could no longer hide from. Sleep did not come. Only thoughts. Only reflection. Only the echo of Oluchi's prayer and the crushing understanding that she had misjudged, mistreated, and mishandled a woman who only wanted peace. By morning, Bellamira looked physically smaller, as though the weight on her spirit had finally shown on her body. For the first time since she arrived, she didn't wake up early to enter the kitchen. She didn't bark orders. She didn't rearrange anything. She simply sat at the dining table, hands clasped, staring ahead quietly. Derek approached her cautiously. Mummy, are you okay? He asked. She nodded without looking up. I'm fine. But she wasn't. Her mind was replaying every sarcastic comment she had made to Oluchi, every unnecessary correction, every bit of gossip she had spread, every moment she chose pride over peace. When Oluchi served breakfast, she surprised both of them by whispering, "Thank you," in a small voice that barely sounded like hers. The house felt different that day, calmer, softer, as though tension finally loosened its grip on the walls. But inside Bellamira, a storm brewed silently. She couldn't believe how blind she had been. She remembered her own mother-in-law and how harshly she had treated her. She had always told people she suffered in her marriage because of that woman's wickedness. Yet now, painfully, she saw the truth. She had become the same kind of mother-in-law she once cried about. That realization cut deeper than any argument Derek or Oluchi could ever give. She felt like running, but pride held her there. She felt like apologizing, but shame tied her tongue. Throughout the day, Oluchi treated her no differently. The same respect, the same soft tone, the same gentle greetings. But instead of comforting her, it crushed her more. She avoided eye contact, avoided conversation, avoided the kitchen where all her mistakes were still visible. Derek noticed the shift, but he didn't know how deep it ran. Only Bellamira understood the war happening inside her, a war between the woman she had always believed herself to be and the truth she now saw. And silently, painfully, she began to accept something she never thought she would. Coming here was not a mission to fix a marriage. It was a mission to confront herself. The next morning, Bellamira attempted to return to her old routine. She woke early, tied her wrapper, and entered the kitchen with the intention of taking charge again. But the moment she touched the pot, her hands trembled. The confidence she once wielded so boldly had dissolved. She tried to cook breakfast, but the stew burned again. The rice softened too much, and when she attempted to fry plantains, the oil popped violently, splattering her hand. She hissed in pain and jumped back, clutching her wrist. Oluchi rushed in instantly. "Mama, are you okay?" she asked, reaching to help. But Bellamira pulled her hand away, embarrassed. "I'm fine," she said stiffly. But her shaking fingers betrayed her. She felt defeated by something as simple as breakfast. When breakfast was finally served, the atmosphere was thick with unspoken emotions. Derek thanked Oluchi for helping, but he glanced at his mother with concern. Bellamira ate slowly, each bite tasting like regret instead of food. She couldn't raise her head. Every sound, the clinking of spoons, the soft humming of the kettle, Derek's quiet chewing, seemed to echo her failures. Halfway through the meal, her eyes filled with tears, she fought desperately to hide. "Mama, is the food not okay?" Derek asked softly. She shook her head. "It's fine," she whispered, but her voice cracked and a tear slipped down her cheek. She quickly wiped it away, pretending it was nothing, but they both saw it. After breakfast, she retreated to the guest room and sat on the bed, staring at her reflection in the wardrobe mirror. She barely recognized the woman staring back. The strong, loud mother-in-law had faded. What remained was a tired, humbled woman who finally understood the damage her policing had caused. She whispered to her reflection, "I can't stay here another day. I can't breathe." The walls felt too close. The air felt too heavy. The shame felt suffocating. She realized she was no longer policing a marriage. She was running from the consequences of her own behavior. And at last, she admitted it silently in her heart. She had to leave. That night, long after everyone slept, Bellamira quietly zipped her bags. Every sound felt loud. The glide of the zipper, the rustle of clothes, the small thump of a bottle of hair cream hitting the bottom of the bag. She paused often, holding her breath, terrified that someone would wake up and ask questions she wasn't ready to answer. She had come here boldly, loudly, proudly, and now she was leaving like a thief in the night. She folded her wrapper neatly, placed it inside, and muttered, "I cannot face another day of this." Her pride had brought her here, but humility was dragging her out. She sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the note she had written. It was simple. "Thank you for having me. I need to return home." She couldn't bring herself to write more. No explanations. No apologies. No confrontation. Just escape. She clutched the paper tightly, feeling tears gather in her eyes. The weight of the past week pressed down on her chest until breathing felt difficult. She remembered her husband's warning, and for the first time, she admitted he had been right. She wasn't here to save Derek's marriage. She had become the one causing cracks. The truth suffocated her. By 5 a.m., she dragged her bags quietly into the corridor. Her hands trembled as she stepped outside into the cold morning air. The sky was still dark, and the compound lights flickered softly. She placed the note on the dining table, took one last look at the house she had tried to control, and whispered, "I'm sorry," though no one could hear. Then she walked out, pulling her bags behind her, her steps quick and desperate. When she reached the gate, she didn't look back. She flagged down a passing taxi, climbed inside, and shut the door. As the car drove away, she rested her forehead against the window and let the tears fall freely. She wasn't just running from Derek and Oluchi. She was running from the version of herself she could no longer bear to face. The sky was still wrapped in darkness when the taxi stopped at the gate. Bellamira hurriedly pulled her bags across the compound, her wrapper fluttering around her ankles like the memory of her fading pride. She didn't dare breathe until she was fully inside the cab. As the car rolled away, she looked back once, only once, and saw the faint silhouette of Derek's home disappearing behind her. A part of her felt relief, but another part felt a deep, stinging shame. How did I, Bellamira, leave someone's home like this? The question echoed in her chest, tightening the breath in her lungs. She imagined waking up in a different world, one where her intentions were pure, her actions wise, and her relationships intact. But she was returning home bruised by her own behavior, forced to confront the consequences she had created. The ride home was long and painfully quiet. The driver occasionally glanced at her through the rearview mirror, perhaps sensing the heaviness she carried, but he wisely kept silent. Bellamira leaned her head against the cold window, watching streetlights float past like slow-moving stars. Her mind replayed everything. Derek's voice raised in disappointment, Oluchi's prayer of grace, the burned meals, the gossip call, the rearranged kitchen that turned into a battlefield. Every mistake landed on her like weights she could no longer lift. She rubbed her thumb against her palm, grounding herself in the reality she could no longer escape. For the first time in years, she felt like a child again, lost, uncertain, humbled. When the cab finally pulled up to her house, she hesitated before opening the door. The house looked the same, yet she felt different. She dragged her bags to the entrance, her heart thumping so loudly that she feared the whole street could hear it. She pushed the door open gently and stepped inside. The familiar scent of home wrapped around her, but instead of comfort, it stirred guilt. She placed her bag down and exhaled shakily. Standing in the quiet living room, she realized that leaving Derek's house wasn't the end of her journey. It was the beginning of facing the truth she had avoided for decades. Mr. Odinio had been awake since 4 a.m., unable to sleep after the argument. When he heard the door open, he sat upright on the couch, his heart pounding. Bellamira stepped inside, her shoulders hunched, her eyes swollen from the tears she had tried to hide. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence stretched between them like a wound waiting to be acknowledged. He finally rose slowly, walking toward her with a gentleness she didn't expect. "You're back," he said softly, not with triumph, not with mockery, but with concern. She nodded, unable to look him in the eye. "I came home," she whispered, her voice small and unfamiliar. He took the bags from her hands without being asked, something she hadn't allowed him to do in years. "Sit," he said. She obeyed quietly, her body sinking into the couch with exhaustion. She clasped her hands tightly on her lap, bracing for judgment or scolding or an "I told you so." But none came. Instead, he sat beside her, his presence steady and warm. "What happened?" he asked simply. The simplicity undid her. She lifted her hands to her face and began to cry, not the loud, dramatic sobs she used for attention in arguments, but deep, broken tears that came from a place she rarely touched. Tears that cleansed rather than performed. Between breaths, she tried to speak. "I couldn't stay. I embarrassed myself. I embarrassed our son. Her voice cracked, and she pressed her fingers to her lips as if trying to hold the words inside. "I faced things there. Things I wasn't prepared for." Her husband nodded slowly, encouraging her to continue. She wiped her face with the back of her hand and whispered, "I saw myself. And I didn't like what I saw." For decades, she had insisted she was the protector of her family, the wise matriarch whose opinions were law. Now she realized that for just as long, she had been blind to the damage her meddling caused. And the confession tasted bitter, but freeing. Once the dam of her emotions cracked open, the rest flowed out without resistance. "I went there to control her," she admitted softly, her voice trembling. "I went with the mindset of policing their marriage. I wanted to correct everything I thought she was doing wrong." She paused, swallowing the lump in her throat. "But instead, I was the one corrected." She told him about the burned stew, the endless chores she took on to prove a point, the confusion she created in the kitchen, the gossip call that exposed her, and how Derek's disappointment broke something inside her. Each revelation felt like peeling back a layer she had been hiding behind for years. Mr. Odinio listened without interruption, his eyes soft with empathy. He had tried to warn her, but he knew she would only learn through experience. When she reached the part about overhearing Oluchi's prayer, her voice nearly vanished. She prayed for me, for God to help her honor me, after everything I did, after everything I said. Her hands shook as she wiped her tears again. "That girl is a better woman than I gave her credit for." She looked at her husband then, fully for the first time, and whispered, "I misjudged her. I misjudged everything." He placed a comforting hand on her back and spoke gently. "It takes strength to admit when we're wrong. Many people never do." She shook her head, ashamed. "I caused trouble. I made life hard for them. I saw problems where there were none. I thought I was helping, but I was hurting them." She leaned into him, exhausted. "I ran away because I couldn't face the mirror anymore." He nodded slowly. Then maybe now you're ready to grow past who you were. She closed her eyes, absorbing his words. It was painful. It was humbling. But it was true. Her confession wasn't just to him, it was to herself. And that was the beginning of something new. After resting and regaining her strength, Bellamira approached her husband with a new honesty. I want to make things right, she said, her voice steady. Not just with Derek and Oluchi, but within myself. I've been hard for too long. Her husband smiled faintly. Then this is the perfect time to start. He helped her draft a message to Derek, asking if she could visit briefly, not to stay, not to inspect, not to teach, but to apologize. Derek responded kindly, relieved by the shift in tone. And so, a few days later, they drove to his apartment, not with luggage, not with instruction, but with humility. When Oluchi opened the door, she was surprised to see Bellamira standing quietly behind her husband, holding only a small handbag. Her posture was softer, her eyes calmer. Good afternoon, my daughter, she said, her voice low. Oluchi smiled warmly and stepped aside to let them in. Derek hugged his mother tightly, the tension between them finally dissolving. After settling into the living room, Bellamira reached for Oluchi's hands. Her fingers trembled. I came to say something I should have said long ago. Oluchi looked into her eyes with gentle curiosity. I was wrong, Bellamira said, her voice breaking slightly. I came to your home with pride, with judgment, with assumption. I thought I was protecting my son, but I was hurting both of you. You were nothing but respectful to me, and I repaid that with trouble. Her eyes glistened with tears. Forgive me. Silence followed, not heavy, but healing. Oluchi squeezed her hands gently. Mama, there's nothing in my heart against you. Your family. And that simple, sincere response melted the last of Bellamira's resistance. For the first time in years, she felt peace, a peace born not from authority, but from surrender. The weeks that followed brought a quiet transformation in Bellamira. She no longer approached relationships with dominance, but with understanding. She visited Derek and Oluchi only when invited, and each time she came, it was with warmth instead of criticism. She sat with Oluchi in the kitchen, not to supervise, but to learn new recipes, to laugh, to share stories of her younger days. Derek watched with relief, grateful that the tension that had once suffocated their home was now replaced by harmony. Even neighbors who had once whispered about her meddling now spoke of how calm she had become. Back at home, her marriage improved too. She apologized to her husband, not with excuses, but with sincerity. I didn't listen, she said, but now I'm ready to. And he welcomed the change with open arms. They spent evenings talking more like friends and adversaries, revisiting old memories with softer hearts. For the first time in decades, peace settled between them, the kind of peace that grows when pride steps aside and humility takes its place. One Sunday afternoon, while visiting Derek and Oluchi, she found herself laughing genuinely as they cooked together. Watching the young couple move around each other with love and partnership, she realized how wrong her assumptions had been. Their marriage did not need saving, it needed space. And now, with her new understanding, she had finally given them that. As she left their home that day, she whispered a quiet prayer of her own. Thank you for showing me myself, and for giving me a chance to change. And with that, Bellamira stepped into a new chapter of her life, one guided not by control, but by wisdom. Please like and subscribe. Thank you for watching to the end. Don't forget to come back for the next amazing tale yet.